It was a place where a person could become a gentleman in the best sense of the word.
I don't know where I would be standing today, but it wouldn't be here if it weren't for Fishburne Military School.
I think the city of Waynesboro would be an entirely different place if Fishburne wasn't here.
Whether at the rifle range, on the parade field, or in the classroom, everything that is done at Fishburne Military School is done to create the next Fishburne man of tomorrow. This tone of discipline, respect, hard work, and leadership has been carried on at Fishburne ever since its inception, and each cadet is connected to this great and proud history by continuing on as a Fishburne graduate. The history of Fishburne Military School could not have gotten its start without its namesake, James Abbott Fishburne. James was born into a large family on April 10, 1850, in Waynesboro, Virginia. The son of Daniel and Daniel's second wife, Margaret Fishburne, James would be the 11th of 14 children. James would grow up in Waynesboro, attending school and working to earn money to help pay for his future college education. In the fall of 1866, James would start his college career at Washington College, located in Lexington, Virginia. This college, known now as Washington and Lee University, was close to home, being only 45 minutes southwest of Waynesboro. Washington College was in a bit of a renaissance as it recently accepted Civil War General Robert E. Lee as its new college president. 4 years later, James would go on to graduate from the school and have his diploma signed by General Lee himself.
James Abbott Fishburne was a remarkable man in many ways. He came from a family long established in the Shenandoah Valley, and he came away from his education at Washington College determined to start a school of his own.
After graduation, James would teach at a variety of schools around the region for almost a decade, but always found his way back to Waynesboro for various reasons. James had larger ambitions for his hometown of Waynesboro, and in the summer of 1879, he would go on to transform a room on the second story of the town's pharmacy into the beginnings of what is now Fishburne Military School. On September 15, 1879, James A. Fishburne officially began the first day of Waynesboro High School in Taylor's store with 24 co-ed students. But just a year later, wanting more space and more students, the school would move to the Academy Building at the corner of Wayne Avenue and Broad Street. Another year after that, Fishburne would choose to make the school male-only, as an all-female school would open up close by. With many aspects of the school changing, so did its name, and in the fall of 1882, the school would change its name to Fishburne Home School, only to change it again the next school year to Fishburne School. James purchased land on Evans Hill to expand the school even more, and in 1883 the first barracks was built. This barracks would be expanded a number of times before being replaced by the current brick structure. As Fishburne School sees another year pass, the nature of the school did as well, going from an all-male school to an all-male military academy. Assistant Isaac Halling Saunders would serve as the school's first drill master.
By 1884, the cadets were wearing a uniform and marching. By 1885, we had a commandant from VMI. The Corps was organized as a battalion. From that, really developed the school that we see on top of the hill today.
In the fall of 1886, the school would go through its final name change to the still current Fishburne Military School. James A. Fishburne was still serving as president of the school, and attendance bloomed to 63 cadets, 49 of which were boarders and 14 as day students. At this point, the school grounds were about 5 acres. Fishburne leased and then purchased the front field land, now Anderson Field, from Taylor's store owner John B. Taylor. The field would be beautified and prepared for future baseball and drilling ground for the students. Trees were planted and the campus was fenced in to unify all buildings and grounds. This year, FMS would receive its first honor, being given the title of Best Drilled School in the district. The school's growth continued as a new gymnasium was built. The extending barracks was now 132 feet long, and all buildings on campus would enjoy a new steam heating system. The next school year, FMS would form clubs for both baseball and football. The first 10 years were of rapid growth and change at FMS, but this growth would waver as the Panic of 1893 set in. This countrywide economic panic would lead to double-digit unemployment for the next 6 years, and would seriously hurt enrollment at FMS, forcing the school into reducing its tuition costs in order to lure new students. In 1897, FMS would receive its first-year accreditation by the Southern Association of Secondary Schools. FMS is proud that this accreditation has been retained as an unbroken annual honor, which is unique among all other Virginia schools. The Spanish-American War would be the first war in which Fishburne alumni would take part in. 17 Fishburne alumni would fight in the war, and only one, Richard B. Smith, would lose his life. The 1903-04 school year would use Swannanoa builder M.R. Ellis to help with the construction of a third story on the barracks. He would also help with enlarging both the kitchen and the dining room. 1904 was a booming year for the school. Cadet enrollment grew almost by half from the year before, and as the school year began, so would the preparation for Fishburne's first printed yearbook, Taps. With photography still being done mostly by professionals, instead of the photo-rich yearbooks of today, yearbooks would contain a variety of other unique prints, including drawings, creative stories, and even favorite jokes of the year. This year would also bring the formation of the FMS Alumni Association. 29 subscribed their names in the matriculation book to be the first official members. Finally, in 1913, after a lifetime of working to better educate and create better citizens, James Abbott Fishburne would retire as principal after 34 years. He would name M.A.J. Hudgens as his successor. The academic year of 1916 was an exciting time in the school's history, as it would soon be getting quite a facelift. A new barracks was the next on the list, and a local architect, T.J. Collins & Sons from Staunton, was called to design the new building. Today, its Gothic Revival-style facade still stands, and the barracks functions as both the classrooms and dorms for the cadets. At the time, it was able to accommodate the boarding of 100 cadets and was given the name the Quadrangle due to its shape. Attached to the barracks is a wing containing a chapel, mess hall, and recently modernized swimming pool. Also, the old wooden barracks was burned down to make room for the front parapet. 3 years later, the additional construction of a sentry box or guardhouse was built into the quadrangle and would open up accommodations to board another 25 cadets. The United States entry into World War I came in April of 1917. After 2.5 years of efforts by President Woodrow Wilson to keep the United States neutral during World War I. Until the end of the war in November 1918, 250 faculty, staff, alumni, and cadets would serve in the war. Of these, many would perish. A greater awareness to news and events would also form as CQ School Newspaper was founded. In February 1919, the U.S. Army JROTC unit was established. Major James F. Byram was the first active duty officer. On Armistice Day, November 11, 1921, at the age of 71, James A. Fishburne would pass away. James and his wife had no children except the thousands of cadets they loved and guided as their own. His motto, "Dare to be right," and the 1922 Taps stated, "This school was the apple of Mr. Fishburne's eye," and one of his last conscious utterances was a prayer for "my boys." In 1924, the two towns of Waynesboro and Basic City are consolidated into the town of Waynesboro. Also, FMS would receive the U.S. Army's new Honor School Award as Morgan Hudgens was promoted to colonel. During the 1925-26 school year, the FMS shield is seen for the first time on the cover of the Taps. Designed by Cadet James Wilbur Owen, class of 1926. 1928, this year stands as one of FMS's strongest bragging dates. This was the first year the Fishburne Cadet Corps was rated an honor military school under the Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC program of the U.S. Army. Fishburne has never failed to achieve this honor and is distinguished as the only junior ROTC school in the country with such a record. Yet with 212 cadets enrolled at this time, due to the Great Depression among other things, the school would not have these numbers for another 15 years. On April 11, 1938, FMS founder's widow, Mrs. Mary Amos Fishburne, dies at age 86 and the school acquires her real estate. Colonel Hudgens becomes superintendent. The school's gym burns down Monday, May 15th between 3:45 a.m. and 11 a.m. Not long afterward, World War II begins, but FMS prospers even in the face of great trial, with notable cadets enrolling at a steady rate. The 1939-1940 school year was a big one. Not only did the FMS rifle team win its first 2 consecutive National Rifle Championship trophies, but the administrative building and the gymnasium were dedicated, and a VMI classmate of Colonel Hudgens, U.S. Army Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall, would review the Corps. During the midst of the Korean War, Fishburne Military School was struggling financially more than ever, and enrollment was down. Fishburne's fate looked grim when tax advisors made it clear to the owners of the school that it could no longer survive as a private business.
I believe it was in 1950, the family stockholder, and there were a few other stockholders, owners of the school, having been advised that it was hopeless for a proprietary school to try to exist the way Fishburne operated on a for-profit basis, decided that the prudent thing to do would be to close the school. And they entered negotiations with the city of Waynesboro. Actually, there were secret negotiations, and came out into the public and announced in that October day that the city had bought the school property, that the school would close the following May, and the city would take over the property and develop it for municipal purposes. And there was an enormous groundswell of opposition to that move among the townspeople, leaders of the town, and just people who depended on Fishburne economically.
The school had support constantly in this community. It had support from the industries and the businesses in this community. It was a part and parcel of public service to this community. I certainly remember taking my young men and my watch down to fill sandbags when the South River flooded. We responded. It is a great school in a small town that is as much part of this town as any other piece or facet of it.
In the fall of 1950, the owners secretly sold the school to the city of Waynesboro to develop the land, and the school was set to close in May of 1951. Opposition was soon to follow from loyal supporters from the Fishburne-Hudgens Educational Foundation.
It was a difficult thing to raise enough money to buy the school. I think at the time it was well over $500,000 was needed. And while they were able to obtain loans and mortgages, they also sold debentures. These debentures would earn interest only if that interest was earned. But these debentures were sold in $50 units. And remarkably, restaurants in town had the situation that every waitress bought a debenture. And of course, businessmen bought larger units. But it was amazing how a lot of people who'd never gone to Fishburne, never had people who went to Fishburne, realized how significant it was to the city and to the economy of Waynesboro, and really to the whole flavor of life here. And they wanted to see that school continue.
The school is a big part of the fabric of the community and contributes to the identity of the community, both in its physical presence and its location in the center of the city. And it has a significant economic presence in the community. It's a terrific employer. The school tends to be woven into the fabric of civic life here. The cadets participate in community events. They support community events by lending their effort and assistance. And I think just seeing the faculty and the cadets around the community is something that is part of most Waynesborians' self-identity as members of the community.
The city sells the school to the foundation, which begins intensive recruiting efforts to keep Fishburne's doors open. After 15 years of being superintendent and 51 years of overall service, Colonel Hudgens retires. To mark the occasion, the Hudgens Rifles Drill Team was formed. Colonel John C. Moore would take over as superintendent but stay for less than 2 years before longtime faculty member and headmaster Colonel Childs would replace him on December 31, 1955. Although this was the height of the Vietnam War and public opinion was turning on the war, Fishburne's enrollment up to this point had been growing strong. The 1967-68 school year had the largest corps in FMS history, with 233 enrolled. Also, this year, former alumni J.B. Yount was elected to the Board of Trustees, and Colonel Hudgens celebrates his 90th birthday. This era brought a lot of changes off campus as well, with the events at Kent State and the shocking Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King assassinations. With all seeming strong at Fishburne, 8th grade was added in 1968 and 7th added in 1969. Two long-serving men went out on top. John Henry Stewart retired after 45 years of service, and Colonel Phil Brooks after 50 years. At this point, the effects of the Vietnam War were finally taking its toll. The additional grade levels offered did not help enrollment, which quickly slipped. From the high just 4 years earlier, FMS was now 100 enrollees lighter and stayed that way for 3 more years when the war ended in 1974.
Yeah, the Vietnam War, of course, was probably the most unpopular war we ever had, certainly up to that time. It was extremely unpopular among the general citizenry. And it made military training in general unpopular with the youth of America. All of a sudden, inquiries at Fishburne seemed to stop almost as if a faucet had been turned off. The tradition of a cadet wearing his uniform when he went home on leave had to be abandoned because we couldn't risk sending a cadet out in uniform on public transportation.
The war would claim 15 FMS alumni lives. Colonel Hudgens dies and Colonel Stone would resign. Not surprisingly, in the fall of 1975, Fishburne opens with its lowest enrollment since 1932, with only 96 students. The toll has also hurt other military schools throughout the country. A bittersweet moment occurs for FMS when Staunton Military Academy closes its doors and 51 of its former cadets enrolled. This same year, Fishburne would welcome the National Honor Society as part of its extracurricular corps. 1979 was a big year for FMS as it officially celebrates its 100th anniversary. A centennial taps is printed and J.B. Yount becomes foundation president. Sports begin to take off as well, with Fishburne becoming VIC champs in both basketball and baseball. FMS would occasionally win other sports championships here and there, but held quite a dynasty for track and field for the next 15 years. Starting in 1980, FMS won the VIC track championships for 5 years straight and took 8 out of 10 in the decade afterward. All under the lead of coach Major Roy Cunningham. This year, 2 big gifts were given to Fishburne Military School. One in the physical form, the Carnegie Library, located just past the southern edge of the school grounds, and one in prestigious form, as FMS has named both a Virginia Historical Landmark and a National Historical Landmark. Colonel Brooks would also retire this year after 50 years of service. The gifts and growth of the school would continue year after year. Another bittersweet moment as the closed Frederick Military Academy donated their cannon to FMS. This cannon is still fired today at field parades and football games. After 40 years, the Fishburne-Hudgens Educational Foundation retired the debentures sold in 1951 and membership is dissolved. Ownership of Fishburne passes to a self-perpetuating board of trustees who oversee the long-term investments of FMS through the use of professional money managers.
To see Fishburne survive and flourish has been really the challenge that kept me eager to do my part on the Board of Trustees. And I've worked with many outstanding older people and younger people in the course of those nearly 5 decades. And I've really seen the school take off.
In 1996, more real estate is acquired with the duplex apartments and the House of Maple Street. And in 1999, the Hobby Hudgens Hall is dedicated and the state historical marker is unveiled. Alumni would be more up to date on FMS as well, with the CQ newsletter being resurrected for the first time in 2 decades.
You ask me Fishburne's secret of success, it's the combination of people that have come together on that little hilltop up there and through history have stayed together. Fishburne, without its alumni annual giving, would close. Those alumni, the hundreds of them that donate, the members of the Colonel Young Brigade, the Senior Giving Club, those who give from $5 to $25 to $10,000 are still all part of that family, and they're treated as part of that family. That's how that school, that little school, survives, is a constant effort since literally its inception, and the constant dedication of a small number of men and women to its future and its success.
The turn of the century and the influence of new technologies brought many positive changes to Fishburne. In 2000, 195 students enrolled and the General Wayne Inn was given to FMS by alumnus Phil Barger and is renamed Barger Hall. In July 2007, FMS launched their redesigned website to allow students, faculty, and alumni direct access to FMS and the ability to easily stay up to date on current events. The site greatly increased internet-based inquiries and enrollment steadily began to climb. 2008 brought tragic news to Fishburne when Michael Woodard dies in a car accident on his way to campus. His father, Mario Woodard, creates Michael's Ride, a 90-mile bike race starting in Waynesboro and ending in Richmond, in his honor. All the funds collected are placed in the Michael Woodard Memorial Scholarship presented to a cadet annually at graduation. 2009 brought in more sad news when John Thomas Hobby Jr., former trustee of the Fishburne Hudgens Education Foundation for over 20 years and generous donator of Hobby Hudgens Hall, passes away at the age of 96. In October 2010, alumnus J.B. Yount is elected chairman of Fishburne's Board of Trustees. This school year also allowed FMS to leap into the virtual classroom, introducing iPads, smartboards, and upgrades to many of the campus computers, with every cadet's room having cable television and internet connection. This focus on technology, which is regulated by the school, has helped enrollment rates, with over 200 students enrolled by the spring semester.
And I would certainly say that the best time I've ever seen for Fishburne are these years right now. I've never known the cadets to be as well-rounded. I've never known the educational program, the curriculum, to be as thorough. Certainly the equipment is better. The athletic program is more far-reaching. It's more inclusive. Everybody is involved. Everybody is challenged. A cadet is forced to learn time management, to learn good discipline, and to learn values that are not always being taught in society as a whole. And of course, seeing that this is the best time I've ever seen, I like to think that there are even better times ahead for Fishburne.
Sports continued to thrive at Fishburne, and fall of 2011 brings in a new head coach, Dan Baranek, to the FMS football team. Also, with the renovation and reopening of the swimming pool located below the mess hall, the swim team gains new members and the school is able to hold meets. Summer school enrollment has flourished in recent years, with 101 students enrolling for the 5-week program focusing on academia, sports, leadership, and aviation training, as well as other extracurricular opportunities. On October 1, 2012, FMS alumnus Gary Morrison, class of 1981 and previous director of admissions, is named superintendent, bringing in new ideas for educational reform at FMS. In recent years, Fishburne has continued its goal to prepare cadets for college and beyond with its dynamic educational experience through the STEM initiative. This focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics allows every cadet at FMS to focus on their future. Some of the programs offered to students include VASTS, Virginia Aerospace Science and Technology Scholars, where students are immersed in NASA-related research. On February 25, 2013, a great honor was earned by Cadet Captain Sean Thomas as he was raised to the level of Master Mason. He is the first Fishburne cadet to reach this level while still attending FMS. Also in 2013, the school announced its partnership with New Day USA Foundation in support of U.S. veterans' families, providing partial or full scholarships to cadets of active, disabled, or retired military personnel. With over 100 years of rich history rooted in the beautiful city of Waynesboro, Fishburne continues to grow, attracting young men who are passionate about learning, committed to excellence, and aspire to make their mark both as a cadet and wherever life may take them as graduates of Fishburne Military School.
I believe if Professor Fishburne walked up that hill today, he would be very proud of what's happened. For all those reasons we've talked about, for all those hundreds of people who've supported that school, from all of its alumni, from its dedicated staff and faculty, from citizens here in Waynesboro, and support from the community, I think he'd be very pleased. I think he would be very pleased at the quality of the young man and the fact that Fishburne is still doing what he set out to do in 1879, and that's educate and mature exceptional young men for leadership positions in the future of this country. Now, I think Professor Fishburne would have a ball.
I think that without question, the future of Fishburne is well secured, and it makes me very proud, of course. And I think that Professor Fishburne would just be astounded at the opportunities the cadets have today, the equipment they have, the knowledge that is available to them, the opportunities they have really to go forward, and the scholarship availability in military and non-military colleges that come to a well-rounded cadet with a good, solid record. I believe he'd be very proud. I know he'd be pleased that the school had survived, but I think he'd feel that it had done much more than survived. And I think he'd say that he might well have taken it in exactly the direction it has come had he been given the time to live these 137 years.